Here.
Here. Joan, could you lead us to a salute to our flag?
Salute. I pledge allegiance.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Our first item is the approval of the minutes of May 22nd, regular session.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Carries unanimously. At this time, there's public participations or anyone in the audience that would like to address the board at this time. Seeing none, we'll go to the consent calendars, which are items 2 through
16.
16. What's your pleasure?
Move approval.
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That carries unanimously. That brings us then to item number 17, which is the approval of purchase of property and building location at 1130 Civic Center Boulevard, Yuba City, and approval of a related budget amendment. Mr. Combs.
Mr. Chairman, the board has authorized me to negotiate for the purchase of the property located at 1130 Civic Center Boulevard in Yuba City. I have done so and am recommending the actions the board should take if it wishes to proceed. There are certain requirements that need to be met. We have given you a staff report indicating that we have met the legal requirements having to do with notice, referring this matter to the City Planning Commission for their review. Meeting the provisions of CEQA, and we are recommending your board take action on that. And we have in front of you an offer to sell the property at a price of $1,250,000. We are recommending that if you wish to proceed, that one, you approve the notice of exemption prepared by the Community Services Department, that's the environmental document. Two, accept the offer to sell the real property and authorize the chairman to execute the document. Three, approve the enclosed budget amendment appropriating the $1,250,000 from one-time revenues. And four, authorize me to make the $10,000 deposit and take any other necessary actions to comply with the terms of the offer. And five, adopt the enclosed resolution authorizing me to complete and execute the enclosed certificate of acceptance when escrow is in condition to close, and take any other actions, including executing documents necessary to close escrow and complete the acquisition process.
Are there any questions?
Council, is, with what we see before us, do you feel that the due diligence of the county has been performed on this building?
What do you mean by due diligence?
Well, just checking it out, making sure that it's the horse that we bought. Did we ask for some termite inspections? We asked for anything that might be excessive damage. Bob is shaking his head, yes. All of those have been pretty much met and satisfactory. We know we need the facility, we know what the purpose is, and
I received a copy of the pest inspection report today. It shows no indication of any pest problem.
thank you.
Larry, we were waiting for one of the existing leases. Do we have that? Do we know what those, do we have all the leases in? Do we know what the terms of the existing tenants are?
I have not yet received the original lease for Tenney and Company. They were in the building when the current owner acquired the building, and there's an amended lease that addresses that. He's in the process of getting me that lease. That amounts to a small portion of the building, but we have all the other leases. So we know what the terms of the leases are.
So if by chance we can't get out of that lease and those tenants are there for a long period of time, can we still occupy the building and utilize the building as we see fit?
There are a number of people whose leases, some of the leases are currently up, some of the leases are about to be completed. The landlord indicated to us that he was in the process of finding other quarters for those tenants, and he's working with them right now. He anticipates no problem of them terminating their leases. Majority of them have, a couple of them have maybe a year left on them. The biggest tenant of the building, their lease expired in this month, as a matter of fact. Some of the other, one of the tenants is already out of the building, even though they still have a lease. They've already canceled that, and two of the other tenants have indicated, the two remaining tenants of any size in there have indicated to the landlord that they are in the process of moving. There is one tenant that will remain there. They have a lease that runs another 2.5 to 3 years, and they've indicated they plan on remaining there. But they have a small portion of the building. We'd be able to utilize the building with them in place.
Okay, and also if by chance this one that's remaining also has a long term like that, can we still occupy the building and utilize the structures? In other words, can we work around the two tenants if they have to end up staying there for 2-3 years? That's my question.
We would have to look more closely at what our options would be in that vein, because we would have about 8,000 feet of the building currently vacant or the lease is expired. The rest of it is, there are still leases. As I said, the landlord has told us that they will be out of the building by the time the escrow closes, and he's told me he'd be getting me the assurances on that in the next period of time.
Okay. Mr. Combs, based on all of that, is it still prudent that we make this purchase at this point in time, in your opinion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any legal obligations for us to find homes for the people that are in that building?
No?
I recall something dealing with transportation, that we had to actually find and procure a place for someone that was actually leasing the building.
There are certain rules that when you're dealing with federal funds in particular, that if you acquire property from someone, you have an obligation for relocation costs. That's what I think you're referring to. That's with federal funds.
Oh.
For example, a bridge project or a road widening project is where we typically run into that issue, and we're not looking at using federal funds in this instance, so that requirement doesn't apply.
Okay, thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the notice of exemption, accept the offer to sell real property, and authorize the chairman to execute the enclosed acceptance form, approve the enclosed budget amendment, which appropriates $1,250,000 purchase costs from one-time revenues, authorize the CEO to make the $10,000 deposit and take any other necessary actions to comply with the terms of the offer, to adopt the enclosed resolution authorizing the county administrator to complete and execute the enclosed certificate of acceptance.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, our next item is item number 18, is the approval of agreement with Priorities Incorporated for WorkNet Employment Services. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This proposed agreement before you is a project between the Human Service Department and the District Attorney's Office, and we have contracted with Priorities Incorporated to provide a job placement, job finding, job intent search for individuals who are in the Family Support Division of the District Attorney's Office. As you know, in the past 5 years since welfare reform, we've been able to reduce our aid caseloads rather dramatically, as they have across the nation. We found that there were a number of individuals who were connected with our welfare programs who were also connected with the family support operations of the District Attorney's Office. This project, being a blended project and using welfare incentive funds as its funding source, has contracted with this organization to pursue those individuals who are in the local area, who are employable, have employment skills, and who can be employed. And we have been doing that for a year now. This is a second year and a renewal of this operation, which we're asking you to approve. We currently have 76 individuals in the program, 40 of whom are employed. They are paying child support at various rates as ordered by the courts and as their employment allows them to do that. Both the district attorney and I feel that this is a very valuable program. As a matter of fact, later this week, the staff from the new statewide Office of Family Support, whatever the name of that is, I'm not exactly sure, are coming out because this is not a unique effort. This is a unique effort in California. There aren't many counties that have this. We learned about it from a NACO conference that I attended and modeled it after a program in Yakima, Washington. So we believe that it works, that it benefits our community, both those who are receiving child support payments, those who are paying child support payments, and it improves the employability of a number of residents of our community. The people, as they are employed, we follow them for a period of time. As they stay employed, we move on and pick up other cases. So we are asking for your renewal of this project that we have, and I'm recommending to you that you sign the agreement between ourselves and Priorities Incorporated for this project.
Are there any questions?
No, I think Ed's they've done a great job on this with them. It's come to the committee and we've highly recommended it, and it shows that how many they've employed and what's happened with this program. And I think it's done a good job. I think this is one of those programs that we need to put in for an award through maybe CSAC or something, how they've done.
Yeah, we discussed that at the committee, and we will be pleased to be providing you that information at your next committee meeting.
Okay, I almost heard a motion out of all that. Did I?
If you want to use that for a motion, I'll make a motion.
Okay. Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye?
Those opposed? Carries
Thank you very
unanimously.
much.
Thank you. Okay, our next item is item number 19, first presentation of ordinance amending Chapter 80 of the Sutter County Ordinance Code related to the duties of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission. Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. What we have before you tonight is a ordinance that basically revises the existing ordinance in the county code pertaining to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission. And the ordinance that we presented, in our opinion, greatly simplifies and reduces the old ordinance. So I thought I'd go through the various sections and briefly tell you what we see the changes are, and, if you will, a little bit of background as to why we made the changes. And I should let the board know that this is staff's interpretation on a number of these issues on previous actions by the board or things that we've heard the board say. So we may have misinterpreted some of your positions on this. The first thing that we've done with the ordinance is basically change it to calling it a Parks Advisory Commission. That was our interpretations of what we'd heard in previous discussions on this issue, that you wanted a commission to advise the board on matters dealing with parks, and so we made that change in the title. Under purposes, we simplified the purposes. In the old ordinance, there was several specific sections that called out things. What we basically said was they'll be involved in the planning of the parks, and that covers a lot of the items that were included in the previous ordinance, but allows leeway for things that may change in the future that we didn't foresee at this time. And we've oftentimes in the past, what we've attempted to do is to not enumerate items specifically in ordinances, because as time goes by, these things change, and then you end up having to make an ordinance change to address those things. Whereas if you can use terminology that's more general, then you don't have to go back and update some of the ordinances as frequently as you sometimes do. The other thing under purposes is we specified that it deals to areas that are outside the spheres of influence of the cities. And this was done because of previous discussions that your board has had that we've heard, particularly most recently regarding the general plan. It was the board's feeling at that time that the county should be involved in doing the planning for the areas outside the spheres of influence for the cities, and so we felt that if that's the case, to be consistent, the Parks Advisory Commission should be dealing with those areas outside the spheres of influence for the city and leaving those parks and facilities that will be within the cities to be under the planning of the entity that's responsible for them in the future, will be responsible for them in the future. One other item that is included in here is because the focus is on planning, we revised the staff support to the Community Services Director from the Public Works Director. I made that
I'm confused.
from Public Works to Community Services.
Community Services.
Because since the focus on this is planning, that is where the bulk of our planning takes place in that jurisdiction, so I thought it would be more appropriate there. Notice I said I didn't say we, because Rich helped me on some of this ordinance, but he wasn't involved in this one. We did change the section regarding appointments to add a requirement that they be residents of the supervisor's district. That wasn't in the existing ordinance. We're interpreting discussions in the past, and we felt that that was the desire of the board to do that, and that was the reason that that was included in there. The meeting section, because we're going to be dealing with issues dealing with planning of parks, we felt that there would be less frequent need for the meetings. You wouldn't need to meet on a monthly basis because planning issues typically aren't as time sensitive as other issues that the board deals with. So we reduced the meeting frequency to quarterly. Quorum. The only really change we are proposing in the quorum was to deal with the fact that it takes a majority of the Parks Advisory Commission, that is at least 3 members, to forward a recommendation on to the Board of Supervisors. And we did include in here through the appropriate committee of the board. That's been the board's policy in the past, and we wanted it spelled out in the ordinance so there was no misunderstanding that items coming to the Board of Supervisors go through committee and then on to the board. But we did change that quorum, as I said, to make it that basically 3 members of the commission would have to approve a recommendation before coming to the board. Before the way it was written previously, something could come before the board with 2 members of the commission in support of it only. Reimbursement. What we did under the reimbursement section was to make that consistent with the planning commission, that the commission members get reimbursed for mileage to and from meetings, and deleted the other expenses that are delineated in there because the county staff prepares the items for the agenda. They make copies of the items for that, and so there really shouldn't be any other expenses. And also, it was, as I said, an attempt to be consistent with other commissions of the Board of Supervisors. And the last thing we did on that was we deleted the requirement for an annual report. Oftentimes, well, first of all, I don't believe there's been an annual report prepared recently, and most times annual reports are something that don't do much other than take up time to put something down on paper and goes away on a shelf somewhere and doesn't get used. So we just don't feel that there's a lot of benefit served from annual reports. With that, I'd ask the board members if you have any questions.
My first question is, Bob, when was this ordinance put in place?
Which, the original ordinance?
The original ordinance?
What? 1992 was the latest update on it. It was put in place prior to that, but I know there was an update in 1992.
I don't have any questions. I have comments. I think what's happening here is the Parks Commission is being emasculated. I don't know why you would delineate to strike out that it has created the commission consisting of 5 members to be known as the Parks and Recreation Advisory Commission. I thought that was always an important part of what they did, and we certainly have some recreational areas that could use some attention from a commission such as the bike path, which is wonderful. I'll make comments on that later. And then the purposes, I like what was delineated rather than this sort of general statement. I thought it made it pretty clear that to help the Park Commission know what their actual purpose was and what they were to advise and do on. The other thing, the appointment of members in terms, I don't know of other commissions where we're limited from among the residents of his or her district, because if I couldn't find someone in my district, I'd like to be able to appoint someone from another district if they were interested in serving in the Parks Commission. On the quorum section, I was surprised to find that in the original, and I had read this a couple of weeks ago, it is never stated in the original ordinance that the Parks Commission reported to any committee. And maybe by board policy that's occurred, and I don't know when that occurred, but the quorum section 80-070 has been changed quite a bit from what it originally said. I have no problem with the meetings being less often. I think it's a burden to meet once a month. I just don't understand why there is this big push to emasculate the Parks Commission. I think they've done a good job for us. We have some money that's coming through for state funds. I think it would be great to have a commission to advise us on these matters as to where would be the best place to use that money in Sutter County. And perhaps limiting it to the unincorporated area of the county outside the spheres of influence of Yuba City and Live Oak is appropriate at this time, but there is no plan for the sphere of influence at this time. So, and I don't know exactly when that's going to be done. We know that the Yuba City has started the planning on that, but we all know plans like that take years to occur. So I'm not happy at all with this amendment. Others, may see this as better for the community. I don't see it as better for the community to change this ordinance. It's been in place a long time. We've had commission people who have been very interested in parks. I think they've been very helpful when we did our general plan and working with that. They were very helpful in Happy Park and West Walton Park. At least from my experience in my district, they were very brave to come to my district actually and talk with people and explain what was going on. I'm very appreciative of what the Parks Commission has done.
Any other comment?
No, I'm in support of the parks, but I think this basically just cleans up a lot of items that need cleaned up here. Just like purposes spells out a lot of things. I think they need to be listed out. It purposes tells it right here that that's what they're for the planning and matters relating to parks and incorporated parts of the county, and that's basically what they're supposed to be doing. I don't think it needs to be spelled out, and I think this just cleans up a lot of it to me. There's a lot of stuff in here that just goes over and over saying the same thing. And so I think it just kind of cleans up the whole thing, and it spells out exactly what the jobs are, what they do. And then coming back to report to the board, I think it's a good idea. I think all committees do that. And I know anything that I'm on, and we all come back and report somewhere along with the board, any committee that I'm on. And I think it's encouraging to come back and report to the board. So I think it just cleans it up.
Any other questions or comment? If not, Sharon Foote, you want to make a comment at this time?
Good evening. I'm Sharon Foote. I reside at 1461 Thomas Drive in Yuba City, and I currently chair the Parks and Recreation Commission. Before I get started, I was appointed by Joan Bechtel, and I appreciate her appointment. And I apologize to her this evening for anything I say that might hurt her or make her feel uncomfortable. But it's time for me to say a few things that I've been mulling in my brain for quite a while. First of all, I received no notice of tonight's meeting that this ordinance was going to be in place. I think that shows a lack of ethical fortitude with Sutter County, There's no common courtesy or decency to me as a commission member or to the members of this community. I can't believe you would do that to a member of this community. Secondly, I do not know why you are eliminating the Parks Commission, because if you change the ordinance to the way it's been proposed, you are eliminating many of the activities or the recreational services we were trying to be involved with and trying to change for the better of our community. There has been out for public notice in many ways, and many, not public notice, but I guess you could say word of mouth kinds of things that some of the Sutter County employees have said, we want to get out of the parks business. Okay? You're getting out of the parks business when you do this. You also received a grant for $287,000 for Parks and Rec. What are you going to do with that money? Who's going to be responsible for expending that money? Are you going to have the Public Works Department come in and recommend the way it is to be spent without community involvement? Or are you going to do an idea where you come in and have the community come in for one meeting and say, okay, this is what we want you to do, and get a rubber stamp? I don't think that's the way you should operate. One thing on this new proposal on the new ordinance, mine says the Public Works Director will provide first-level staff assistance to the commission. I didn't get that feeling from Mr. Barrett. Is that incorrect? I thought you
The
said...
amended ordinance says, Bob, the Public Works Director will provide first-level staff assistance to the commission. I think this is a typo. I think you meant to have the, no? Yes? You want to see it? No.
Unfortunately, I was on my way to a meeting last week, and I asked that the most recent copy be included in the board agenda packet, and I didn't check it, so
So it should be the Community Services Director.
that was what I had intended, yes. But for some reason, that one isn't the one that got in your packet. I apologize.
The commission members in previous meetings have recommended that we go back to the Community Services Department, considering we're doing a lot of planning and that kind of thing, and felt that would be a better way, a better community, or a better committee to serve with, was through the Community Services Director. I would hope that you would take a moment or two in your very busy lives to review the old ordinance, which was established in November 10th, 1992, with no corrections or modifications over the years. Some things have changed with a matter of time, but they were never changed in the ordinance. One of them had to do with reporting through the Public Works Committee, which we had talked about many times at our committee, but we did not push it through because of the ordinance that we were operating under. I guess we're now what we call round two. After the meeting that you indicated you would continue with the commission as it presently existed, one employee to another employee in this room said they have only won the first round. Now we are in round two. If you change and limit the responsibilities of the commission, you are ultimately eliminating the commission. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to comment at this time? If not, I'll bring it back to the board.
Sharon, I have a couple questions if I could ask you. That's right. Please, just for clarification.
Okay.
Okay. I don't like who said, they said, she said that. So if you don't mind enlightening me, I'd like to know what employee to what employee had made the statements that you'd heard, because I'd like to know that.
I don't think that's appropriate in a public meeting.
Well, I think it is if you're
I
going to
would do
make
it in a
those
private.
statements.
I would do it in a private
Okay.
session.
Because
But
I
it's
think
employee
publicly, if you're going to
rights.
make those statements, I think it is important, at least from my standpoint. The other thing is that, as I recall, you were at the board meeting approximately 2 weeks ago when Supervisor Bechtel asked for this to be agendized for tonight's meeting. And that may be the very reason why you were not noticed. I mean, you were at the meeting and it was a discussion well beyond what we could discuss that evening because it was not agendized to have this item placed on this meeting's agenda. And I'll only assume right now that's the reason why that, that you weren't specifically notified, you didn't request to be notified. Quite often, we will have individuals at our meeting specifically request to be notified if a meeting's coming up for an item on that.
Well, you and I have a difference of opinion there, but that's okay.
Okay, that's fine, but I mean, you were at the meeting. I mean,
I
I knew
agree,
it
I
was
was at
coming
the
up. I
meeting.
assume you knew it was coming up also. The last issue dealing with Parks and Rec Commission is that, although over the years, the commission's been charged, I guess, with looking at what funds we have in the county and how to recommend spending those, I think we've gone from recommending how to spend those funds as to the commission has perceived that those are their dollars and the commission wants to spend them how they see fit. And I think that's one of the areas that the board as a whole and the commission is having is that, the Parks and Rec Commission was established to be an advisory commission to the Board of Supervisors. The responsibility was to advise the board on issues dealing with parks and recreation. And that has slowly evolved, probably because of the interest of people serving on that commission to be a committee that wanted to take responsibility of doing things far and beyond what they were charged to do. The revision of this ordinance is the intent is to bring that back and put it in line with other commissions, which are advisory commissions to the Board of Supervisors. And that's what I see us doing here. It's not an elimination of the Parks and Recreation Commission. It's an elimination of a function of that. This board may very well decide to create a Recreation Commission based on what we see happening in the South County, happening someplace else, separate of the Parks Commission. So you see it as a commission that's dying. I look at it as, okay, we're revising it. The Parks Commission is going to still function. And we have not said what we're going to do with the recreation portion of that. And we may very well do something else with that. We may charge you with that responsibility at a future point in time. So I see, contrary to what you're saying, it's not the death of a commission, it's the rebirth of a commission because of the inability of the commission to act for lack of a quorum and be able to do things.
I don't think you can use the issue of a lack of a quorum when you have two people who have volunteered to serve. Whether or not you are going to change the duties of the Parks Advisory Commission and establish a Recreation Commission is another group out there that you're going to ask people to serve on. You're going to have to give them duties and responsibilities more than what I see you're giving the Parks Commission responsibilities on. How are you going to divide, say, the $287,000 that you've received? Are you going to give $100,000 to Parks and $187,000 to a Recreation Commission?
Well, first of all, that'll be a decision of the Board of Supervisors how we're going to
That's
divide
right.
monies.
I agree with you. We have been very prudent in expending monies. We've been trying to build up some money so that we could advise you, suggest ways that could be spent. And we've been holding off trying to accumulate some money since you put in the $150,000 cushion, so to speak, that we never knew where that came from.
Okay.
I'm not sure anybody else does. But that's kind of beside the issue. The idea is there is monies there. I just personally think you are gutting the Parks Commission and getting out of the parks business. And you are accepting money for Parks and Rec, so you're going to give it all, $287,000 to Recreation? I don't know. I'm just asking some questions.
When we decide that, that'll be in a public meeting, we'll have those discussions publicly, so it won't be a smoke-filled backroom decision as we
Well, that's
make
good.
all of our decisions here publicly.
That's good.
I'd just like to make the comment that on the notification, I think we were remiss out of courtesy not to notify the Parks Commission, those members who are still there, of, that we were considering amending this ordinance. It does involve them, and they've been giving their time freely for quite a long time.
Joan, I'd agree if they were not at the meeting, but the chairman of that commission was at the meeting when you asked for this to be agendized, and she is your appointment, so.
Well, Dennis, generally, and I don't really want to argue with you about it, but generally, I think we have been courteous and let people know when it's something that we think that we know that they have an interest in, that we usually do notify them when we're going to be making a decision on the board. It was an oversight. I'm just sorry it happened.
There is a section in the old ordinance on reimbursement as well as the new ordinance. As far as I know, not any of the commission members have ever requested reimbursement for a meeting.
Any other comments or questions or anything from the board?
What is the next step? I gather this is the first reading, so to speak, and then in 2 weeks you adopt the ordinance? I don't know what the timeline is.
Actually,
Chairman,
this may not go anywhere, depending on what the board wants to do. This may get revised. We may take all those scratched out lines that are in the first one and put them all back. There's a million things that could occur. But if we do, or if the board does adopt an ordinance, then the second reading or the second portion will be a week from today, if I'm not mistaken. And then it becomes an ordinance 30 days from that time.
So it'll be June 5th? It's a week from today.
I don't have the calendar.
Okay, thank you.
What's your pleasure?
A comment from community, it's going to be in the hands of community service, is that correct? If the ordinance is changed?
Yes.
Comments from community service on the items, meetings, quorums, some of the new changes, Rich, anything that you'd have to add to that makes more sense for your operational and functional purposes?
In my discussions with the Public Works Director, then I would agree that if this commission is to plan parks, that ought to be involved in my department, which has the planning function, but only if that's all they do. If they are involved, as they have been in the past, with operational issues, then of course it would not be advisable to have them in my department, or have staff from my department assisting them. There are a couple of items on here that, as Mr. Barrett indicated, we just made because that's the way the Planning Commission operates, and so.
Can you tell me what operational issues that the Parks Commission was involved in? Anyone?
Mr. Barrett might. I don't get involved in operational issues in the parks.
Well, I didn't think they did either.
Well, one of the issues that the Parks and Rec Commission spent a great deal of time on is the caretaker issue at Live Oak Park. Trying to set criteria for the caretaker, how long people should be camping in the park, that kind of thing. That is, if you will, that's an operational issue. That came about because at one point in time we indicated that the caretaker was exceeding his authority in permitting people to extend their stay at Live Oak Park. And
Well, Bob, I don't see anything in the old ordinance that would, that says anything about the Parks Commission getting involved in operational issues. So I don't understand why they just weren't told that that was not one of their duties and their purposes.
They were and did not listen. I personally told the commission at the Live Oak meeting that the personnel issues that they were tackling was really beyond what they should have been dealing with. But
Then it seems to me that's all that really needed to be done rather than change a whole ordinance, because nothing in the current ordinance alludes to that I can see to the commission being involved in operational issues at all. I mean, if that was the problem, then they just should have been said, that's not your purpose. The end.
Could I make a comment on that, since it's been brought up and I wasn't going to bring it up?
Certainly.
A number of months ago, the caretaker for Live Oak Park did come to talk about his duties and responsibilities. There was a list that he shared with us, and at the time the commission looked at it and reviewed it, and we're trying to update it and make it more current as to what his current duties and responsibilities were, to eliminate things that didn't seem to be working at this time. And we were going to come to you as a board suggesting these changes because they weren't working, and we were trying to do something to help the community members of Live Oak. And so that's where that came about. And I think that's one of the reasons that the commission is being eliminated. I'll be blunt about it since it was brought up.
Is this individual a county employee? No. But he resides on county property?
But it was nothing that the commission should have been addressing.
No, not at all.
I mean, even under our current, nothing, unless you see something in here, Bob, that,
Any other comments?
I guess I should finish that. Maybe in some people's eyes we were wrong in what we were doing, but we were trying to do something that would help the area of Live Oak, the park, and the community members there so that they would have a smoothly run park. And that park is in the best shape it's ever been in years. And so we were trying to get every little piece and everything put together and come with you, to you, through the Public Works Committee with some ideas on what is currently happening and how we can keep this great park for Sutter County.
Thank you. What's your pleasure, board members?
I'll make a motion, whether it's seconded or not, we'll see. The only change that I would see that needs to be done is the change that Bob has suggested, and that the Community Services Director will provide the first-level staff assistance to the commission.
Okay, I have a motion. Is there a second? Seeing none, dies because of a lack of a second. Anything else?
I have a question for either Bob or, yeah, Rich is still here, he's hiding behind Bob. In the revised ordinance, if we were to interject the word recreation back into that, what additional modifications would we have to make to the purpose? Maybe Rich, you can handle that. If we're looking from a planning perspective as to
Recreation, we have to add
recreational
back.
uses in the county, how would you see that fitting in?
I mean, taking the ordinances that's been modified here and just putting recreation back
Getting
into
the,
it.
yeah, recreational
The
function
reason
back
that
into it.
recreation was taken out, as I understand it in the first place, is because we understood in some of the previous discussions before your board that the Fish and Game Commission was basically functioning as the Recreation Commission. And so, you know, taking care of the
They
recreational
function as a piece of
possibilities.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, they
So-
have a piece of, that's our problem, we have pieces of it here and there.
So in our efforts to clarify that this is a Parks Commission, not a Parks and Recreation Commission, then that's why we made that change. If you'd like to put it back in, it's just one of those things that now you have something, it's something not to be clarified what you mean by recreation.
Where do you consider the bike path then? Bike paths in our bike path master plan, is that considered parks, or is that considered recreation, or what's that considered?
I would consider that a park myself.
I don't know,
I think it's kind of both.
kind of both, yeah.
I don't know what the distinction between recreation and parks is. I just know that there is a distinction between some of the things that the Parks Commission in the past has considered parks, such as boat ramps and that type of thing. And so we're just trying to clarify. Whatever we can do to clarify that, I think is appropriate.
Well, Joan has raised a good point. Bob, how has the Parks and Recreation Commission functioned as far as dealing with the bike lanes, the bike paths, and in particular, the newest bike path we just created?
Well, technically, the bike paths, bike lanes and bike paths are part of your transportation system. They're considered that way. The funding comes from that source for most of the projects. They come from various gas taxes or special grants through Caltrans for bike paths. So, I mean, if you want to get technical about it, they're transportation. The Parks and Rec Commission has, some years ago, when the bike master plan was adopted, my recollection is they were involved in that process when the original bike master plan was put together, and I can't remember the year that was done now, but there was a bi-county effort put together by a consultant, and it went through all the various entities and the commissions and the planning commission and onto the board for final adoption. Subsequent to that, the Parks and Rec Commission was involved only peripherally in the development of the bike plan out to Sutter, for example. Probably not as much as they could have or should have been involved in it. It was a grant money that came for specific purposes and was limited into its applications to the county. For example, it had to be used for a commuter route. And there was not a great number of options around Sutter County for something to be designated a commuter route. So on that particular one, they weren't involved directly. They were kept informed, if you will, on an ongoing basis of what the status of that project was. But that was basically.
Under if this board was to revise this ordinance and recreate or modify the Parks and Rec Commission to a Parks Advisory Commission, would they still, if we were doing a master update of, say, the bike paths, like we did a few years ago with the bi-county deal, would that still be something that would be taken to this commission for input and those type of things? They're dealing with parks, and parks tie into bike lanes. Do you still see them functioning as they did as the Parks and Rec Commission, as if they were strictly the Parks Commission in that role?
I think at this point, we probably would take it to anybody in order to get a wide dissemination of information. Technically, they probably would not be involved. For example, I wouldn't consider a bike lane along the highway a park. That's something that I would not consider a park. That's more of a.
No, I agree with that, but what I'm saying is when you're talking about updating a master plan for bi-counties, 2 counties, or tri-counties, or quad counties, whatever we're doing, those will tie into park systems and parks and that kind of stuff. Under that type of a master plan, would you take that plan to a Parks Commission, whether it be our Sutter County Parks Commission or Yuba City Parks Commission, and would they have input into the overall of the plan, not specifics of the routes themselves, but how should they or should they tie into a park system? And if we're creating a park over here, is it important to get a bicycle lane to that park? Would they be involved with those type of recommendations to this board?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? From his comment, you mean? Is it pertinent to this board having to make a decision? That's a question, is it? What's your pleasure? We can spend millions of dollars in a quick emotion, but personal things are hard.
I would make a motion to send the purposes portion only of the Parks and Recreation, the Parks Advisory Commission portion back to committee for assessment as to whether there are some areas in there that still need clarification for a final decision upon this commission. Is that clear enough?
Okay, I have a motion. Does everyone understand the motion?
What committee are you referring to, Dan?
I'm assuming Public Works.
Public Works had this, did you not? Did Public Works, I should ask a question first. Did Public Works line out the areas that were, who lined them out?
This came to the Public Works Commission on...
Lined out?
Lined out the way it is. We received, I think Joy out of Bob's office was on vacation or was at least gone at the time. We normally get our agendas the Friday before, and we have a, Friday, and we have a whole week, and our meetings are on Thursdays. We got this like Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday evening, and so I, for one, and the commission did not read through this, and we made those statements. I think Casey, the same thing, was we hadn't looked through this at the time. We felt because of the fact that was partially an emotional issue with members of the community that whatever decision would be made by the board as a whole, and so we, in essence, said this needs to go to the board, and so we didn't spend a lot of time on it. But it came to us lined out the way it is.
Who took the privilege of lining it out?
Staff.
Based on previous discussions, as Bob indicated earlier, as to what they perceived comments were from the board as far as potential directions.
Okay.
I for one don't have a problem with the revised purpose. I think it's broad enough that will cover issues dealing with park systems in Sutter County. Is it different than it was before? It certainly is. But the majority of the parks are going to be covered by the spheres of influence of Yuba City and Live Oak. We will and continue to have some parks outside of that. We have a master parks plan that the board has never adopted that I think this, at some point in time, this board will take a look at, that's based on population, says we're going to have X amount of acreage of parks out in the rural area. I question that. That's pretty growth inducing, and I don't think that we want to get into that type of density of parks out in the rural areas, but that's yet for this board to decide. If we went that direction, this commission could act upon that and cover that. So as a member of the commission, I don't have a problem with the purposes that are here. I think it's broad enough and should be broad enough. I think with these purposes and the discussion's been here this evening, that whether it's in Bob's department or Rich's department, I think some direction will be given to the Parks Commission as to what their roles and responsibilities are dealing with personnel issues and what have you. I think that's real clear that that's been a weak point in the county as a whole. So to bring it back to the committee, I don't know if there's a reason for that, Dan. I can't see us modifying this greatly as one member of that commission or committee.
However, he does have a motion, so I will ask for a second on this motion. And it dies for lack of a second. We're back to square one.
Make a motion, the Board of Supervisors adopt this subject ordinance and direct the clerk of the board to give the first reading of the ordinance by title only.
And would that include that change to?
Yes, that includes the change with the community services.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
Okay, it passes 2-3. 3-2. Never was much of a scorekeeper. Okay, our next item.
Mr. Chairman.
The title.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Read the title only, please.
An ordinance of the County of Sutter amending the Sutter County Ordinance Code by amending Chapter 80 thereof relating to the Parks Advisory Commission.
Thank you very much. Okay, item number 20 is the approval of amendment to the Sutter County Street Landscape Maintenance District budget to transfer funds to the city of Yuba City.
Mr. Chairman, this is a cleanup item brought about by the recent annexation of the Walton area into the city of Yuba City. They, as part of their annexation, they took over a number of special districts that were created some years ago, and they've asked for any fund balance remaining in those accounts be transferred to them. And that's what we're before you tonight doing. As you can see on my cover memo, many of the fund balances are in the negative, which means they're not going to be getting any money, obviously. And but we have a balance of approximately $8,000 that we would be able to send to the Yuba City, and it's for the landscape, primarily for the landscaping of Bogue Ranch Landscape Maintenance District.
We can't ask them for $29,000 for the losses that we had in the other areas.
I seem to recall your board made a commitment a while back to
Yes, we did.
forward.
We definitely
even
did.
though we forecast those losses. I would note that this does require a four-fifths vote because it's a budget amendment.
Move staff's recommendation.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries unanimously. And I think this ought to be noted, these are sometimes the funds that people say, where does it go? Once it goes to the county, they're all very well accounted for, and they're now being transferred to the agency that's responsible. Okay, our next item is 21, which is a discussion of possible actions on proceedings with application for certification as a certified unified program agency, known as CUPA, and set the dates June 12th at 6 o'clock for a study session concerning issues related to the preparation of the application. Mr. Hall.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, before I begin my staff report, I'd like to introduce to you Mary Tipton. I don't think she's ever been here to a board meeting. She's an administrative analyst in our office, and she has been kind of spearheading the application process and being our liaison. And or I should say, if we go forward, she would be the program manager for this.
Welcome.
We also have the Agricultural Commissioner, Mark Quisenberry, who currently is performing one of these functions. You may recall, over the years, in the past 8 years or so, I've been before your board talking about Certified Unified Program Agencies, or CUPAs. They are a unification of 6 different hazardous materials programs, and this is kind of a unique thing in the United States, the way California is doing it, having the local entities responsible for permitting, inspecting, and enforcing the laws in these areas. Because of problems that we've discussed with your board before with regard to our relationship with the state in this matter, we have not so far chosen to apply for certification. However, last year, SB 1824 was signed into law, and it'll take effect in July 1st of this year, and that changes things significantly with regard to our relationship with the state, and provides that the secretary, who has heretofore by law been required to work with the local agencies to try and figure out how to, the best way to deliver the programs would be, SB 1824 now mandates him to make sure there is a CUPA in every county. And with regard to that, it can be a variety of different types of entities, but he must ensure that there will be one. However, that bill also provides funding for those counties who are not yet CUPAs. The reason for this change in the law comes as explained to us by Representative of Cal EPA, because their US EPA doesn't understand how things work in California. They don't believe that the way things have been working in the past will work. And then there are a variety of other groups and legislators that also are concerned that the programs are not being fully implemented in the rural counties. So we believe, as staff, having met with Cal EPA, having met with RCRC over the last couple of years actually, and looking at our options at this point, we believe it is prudent for the county to, at this time, go forward and give the state a letter of intent telling them that we intend to apply as a CUPA. the timeline that has been outlined by the state in order for us to receive funds, if we want to have some funds from them in implementing the program, is we must give them by July 1st a letter of intent saying that we will apply, and then we must make application with Cal EPA by September 1st, 2001. And then their deadline says that we must receive certification by, I believe it is July or June 30th, 2002, in order to receive the funding. They have indicated to us verbally that they will still work with us. The certification is a very onerous process. And so if we're not certified by that date specifically, they've said they will continue to work with us. But they want to get these counties, the counties that are not yet Koopas, moving, basically.
I have a question. Does the county become the certified unified program agency?
That is one of the things that
County
can happen.
agency.
That is one of the things that
That's
can.
the thing I'm unclear about in this.
And that's one of the reasons we wanted to set, there's a number of issues that we will need to discuss with your board, and I will answer as many of those questions as I can reasonably tonight. We would also like to have a study session to kind of familiarize your board with give you some background, because I know at least Supervisor Silva hasn't been here very long, and it'd be nice to get him up to date. But let's back off and look just a minute at what actually exists today. What exists today is that the Ag Commissioner performs the underground storage tank program, and Emergency Services does the business plans, and at this point, CalARP, to the extent it's being done. The Fire Department takes care of the HMMPs, and they also notify the federal government on the Spill Prevention, Control, and Countermeasure Plan. The state, DTSC, does the Hazardous Waste Generator Program. What I believe would be in the best interest of the county is for the county to be a Koopa, okay? They will also allow the county to be the Koopa and have what they call participating agencies, so that, for example, if we wanted somebody else, and I think we ought to try and get the state to keep the hazardous waste generator program and have them do it, well, they can become, and in the law it says they can become a participating agency. Now, of course, that presents us with a whole range of issues we need to deal with. Do we want to, are they the cheapest participating agency? Do we want them? You know, can we work with them? That kind of thing. We can also use other entities like a city to be a participating agency. In some counties, there are actually cities that are the Koopa, and pieces of the county are participating agencies. But each participating agency has to have a contract, and that contract has to be approved by the state. Now, the law also allows for the state to be the Koopa. The state can say, okay, we're going to take over your programs and we will be the Koopa. It also provides for them to assign another county, like Sacramento County, to be the Koopa. It also provides for there to be joint powers agencies for Koopas. So there's all that broad range of entities that can be Koopas. We feel that it is better for the county to be a Koopa. And we'll talk more about our relationship, that is the relationship between our department and the Ag Commissioner's Department. Assuming...
Well, you know, the reason I asked the question
Go
is
ahead.
because in the letter, is the county applying to be the certified, the Koopa? That's the
Yes.
thing, okay, we are applying as
We
the
will be
county.
applying before September 1st. We will have to provide the state with either an application or a work plan to be the Koopa.
So we're not suggesting some other entity be created, a joint powers agreement or anything? We're just, okay.
No. Now, we will go to a meeting, I believe, on June 12th over in Colusa County, where they will review some joint powers agencies and some other possibilities. I would not recommend that we, for example, Colusa County is interested in working with us somehow on this. But I would not recommend a joint powers agency. I would recommend that if they want us
Be the
to be their
agency.
Koopa, We just do it by contract. And that we be the Coupa and they contract with us. They be their own Coupa and just contract with us.
Joint powers would allow you to have other counties involved. You have other counties with specific interests that wouldn't be necessarily site-specific for Sutter County or would fall under this agreement. Would you not have, a JPIA would give you all kind of problems in a situation like this, no?
Well, I believe it would, because you'd have to set up a separate board, and you'd have to, it would be, and my whole idea here is this program, as I understand it, and this is my own opinion, is just riddled with bureaucratic stuff. And so I'm trying to keep it down as much as possible. And I see a JPA as just another level of bureaucracy that we just don't need.
I mean, I know how tenuous it is on the Department of Agriculture, just in the mandates of hazmat and all the other things you're doing through this. I suppose that's where this is all coming from, is it not? Some of your hazmat programs fall in this too?
Right. Now, having said all of that, I don't want to say anything about our fellow counties. There are 4 counties, they call them the quad counties. I think it's Sierra and Plumas and Lassen and one other, maybe Modoc. They are going forward with or they're looking into a JPA, because up there it makes sense. I mean, they just have to do things by JPA. They have a JPA up there that deals with solid waste, and also either the same one or another one that provides environmental health services. So,
Rich, for those that are watching TV tomorrow night and accidentally crossed upon our channel, they're probably going right now at home going, what is a Coupa? Tell me, what is a Coupa? What does it do? Could you, like a real simple...
sure, let me give you the...
what it is.
Let me give you the view from a businessman. Basically, a Coupa is a regulatory agency, okay? But a single business is that deals with hazardous materials is regulated by a whole lot of people. And the state, the Department of Toxic Substances Control, DTSC, Cal EPA, US EPA, I mean, there's all these different people. This was an attempt to unify some of those that have the most in common, so that the businessman would only have to pay one fee to one entity, have one inspector come around, and really have to only deal with one person, at least for these programs. This is only 6 of a whole bunch of programs. I mean, there's still a bunch of other people out there involved. In fact, I was reading the application, and Coupas are required to maintain good relations with about a dozen state agencies so that they can do their enforcement. And so it's meant to be more friendly to the businesses. It's a step in the right direction. And I believe that as we continue to develop industrially down in the south area of the county, we really want to be, and we want to be in this game, and your board really wants to be, have your handle on the implementation.
Rich, when this first started a few years ago, one of the concerns that was raised by your department, and you in particular, and I think Mike and a few others, was, first of all, we didn't know what type of administrative costs were going to be coming down from the state. Do we still know what that is? In other words, you know, we're administering, as you say, there's 6 items on here. We're doing 4 of the 6. The state is supposed to be doing the other 2, and at least the discussions at a committee level is it's real questionable if they've ever been doing what they're supposed to do, where we have been doing our portion of it. But we also keep the cost down very minimal in doing these programs that are required. One of the concerns we've had is that with all these new requirements, you know, we're going to go to the Joe businessman and say, okay, you know, here's the new regulations, and oh, by the way, here's the new bill for all this garbage that the state is saying we have to do now. Has that changed at all?
No. This is, and perhaps to correct maybe a little misunderstanding, we are doing these to the best of our ability. Staffing is going to be the biggest issue that we're going to have to deal with.
And so we're going to put a charge on top of that to cover the staff.
For example, let's take the business plans. We do the permitting. We've always done the permitting. We've never done any inspections. State law requires us to do inspections, so we're going to have to start doing some inspections. And to have an inspector on staff is going to take some money. CalARP, we have not been doing any inspections there. There are things that we haven't been doing that we will have to do. Now, what we'll be looking into as we apply is trying to put everything together so that we don't have half of 3 different inspectors. We're going to try and get one inspector that can handle everything.
What did you say you did not inspect? You said you did not inspect something at this time. You made a...
Oh, we don't inspect those businesses that file business plans. For the business plans. They may be receiving inspections from somebody else for something else, but there's never been an inspection there. So these are things we're going to have to work out.
And describe briefly what a business plan is, so.
Oh, okay.
Just very general.
Everybody who has a certain level of hazardous material on their site, and there's threshold levels, so if you have below that, then you don't have to worry about it. But if you have over the threshold level, you have to file a business plan that gives a number of pieces of information.
And that includes farmers, right?
And that includes farmers. That includes farmers who have over that threshold. And they are required to give us a map showing where this is and what it is. And this is primarily used for emergency responders, so that when they go, when there's a fire on the site, they go in, they know, they know what's there, and they know where it is, so they don't go
Settling in the corner of the shop? Yeah.
And it's also required under the federal law requiring community right to know, so that anybody can walk in and take a look.
You know, and that's real good in principle. I mean, on paper, that looks real good, but the reality of it, Dan, you're a farmer. I mean, you know, how much of that stuff gets moved around? You file a plan today, it's out of compliance tomorrow, you're going to be running down to the office again, filing a plan tomorrow, the next day after that, when you move materials around. That's the ludicrous part of it. Now, from a emergency service person, obviously, you know, they want to know basically what's on site. I can see the importance of some of this stuff, but it goes, to me, way past being practical to the ludicrous part of what we're going to be required to be mandated by law to do. Basically, what I see is cover the state's tail, what it amounts to, because they're not doing their job, so now we're going to do it for them.
And let me make
The problem too are the quantities they're talking about. If I'm not mistaken, a large acetylene cylinder, which a lot of farmers or a lot of hobbyists have, I believe qualifies you to have to put in a business plan, depending on the number of cubic feet.
Yeah.
And if a fireman or any emergency people show up to my yard, as an example, and they look in a place that looks like a shop, I know the firemen are immediately going to say, you know what's in there? There's fuel in there, there's all of these things, so they're going to be very careful going in there. But for me now to put in a business plan, what if I move my portable cart over to the other side of the building? Am I now in trouble?
Got to file another plan.
This really is going to get to the point of being absolutely crazy.
Well, it can, and that's one reason why I do not believe, one of the board's options is to say, you know, we're out of here, we're not going to do any of these programs, and the state will come in and be the CUPA or mandate a CUPA. And I don't believe that that's an option we want to pursue. I believe that we have a fairly good track record now with regard to regulation out of this department, that we can be reasonable, and we can do reasonable regulation.
But
and
not if we're going
fulfill
to have to hire all the additional people that's going to be required to do this, Rich. You know, we are. You know, Mark's doing an excellent job out of his department as far as doing the pieces he's doing. So does community services and that. You know, we're doing a good job at the county level right now. What I'm fearful of is the additional regulations. Once we become the CUPA, the additional regulations that the state's going to make us do, and you know, you're going to stand before us and say, you know, gosh, I need 3 more people, or 4 more people, 1 more person, and because we got to start doing this, this, and this, and you're going to say, board, you don't really have a choice in this. Yeah. And we're going to do like we do and bat this thing around and agree, and end up hiring 2 or 3 extra people. Well, who's going to pay for that? Dan is a farmer. Casey is a gentleman farmer. Is me if I got a little hobby shop. Dale Green sitting out there as, you know, businessmen and that kind of stuff. I mean, you know, that's the people that's going to pay for it.
That's correct. That's
because we're going to pass that cost right on to them. We have to.
You have to.
$60,000 that the state's going to give us if we get all that is a drop in the bucket. I mean, your report's good with. I like your with talking about the carrot and all the little things you put in here. I mean, that's accurate.
It is accurate.
That's what they're doing to us.
That's what they're doing. And I think at this point, I think that the position that we want to be in as a county is doing as much as we can to make the program operate as best as it can. I don't want to misrepresent the fact that we are doing everything we ought to by law now.
Rich,
So,
you're right on. RCRC has been going on a lead on this quite a bit. I don't know, have you been working through RCRC at all?
I have. I've been meeting with RCRC.
Right. I know they're going to have some more, and they said they'd even come up, and probably if we have a study session, they would even bring people up here for it. But basically, the last meeting I was in about a week ago, this went on for about 2 hours of debate. And there's a lot of counties, they just can't afford it. They don't have any people. You've got one person in your planning department, or maybe one or two people in your ag department, so they just can't do it. So they're telling the state says, well, we'll just come in, we're going to do it, and we'll charge it out to you. You know, we'll take your money. If it takes more money, we'll charge it out to you. So they're basically just telling them that we're going to do it, and you're going to do it.
And they will do that. And also,